Hello again, I'm Bob Colton. We're continuing our conversations in Charlotte Public Schools. Wayne Brown is with me. Everybody knows you from the middle school, but you've been working in Charlotte for a number of years, haven't you?
Correct, yes. This is my 8th year in Charlotte. I was started at Washington Elementary and then came to the middle school after a couple of years.
And so how's it going in the middle school?
Oh, the middle school's wonderful. It's a exciting time in kids' lives where everybody's trying to figure out what they're all about, and I'm walking down the hall a little bit nervous, but in the end, the kids all make it to high school and they all look back, and I come up and visit the high school and they say, "Oh, just high school's just really good." I said, "See, we all just go through the middle school times, and it's okay for everybody. You just got to get through."
So now, how do you describe those middle school times? Because I know that every educator and every parent kind of understands, and some struggle with understanding the middle schooler, but how do you sort of describe and lay out what young people are going through?
Well, we had an expert, Dr. Heffelblower, who works through Marzano's Institute, come in and explain to us once. It was the best example I was ever given, because the frontal part of your brain just kind of shuts down a little bit through your middle school ages, and she has some middle school age kids and a principal, and sort of understands very well what she's talking about. And she says, when they get going, they just start thinking in the moment. There's nothing to stop it. There's no little person on the shoulder to say, "Shh, don't say that." They just go. And she said, as the adult, you're supposed to once in a while tap the front of your head and go, "I'm the adult. I actually have the ability to slow and think and do the things that are supposed to be done. And they're not in that space right now. So just give them their room and let them grow." And she was really kind of a good person to make that bridge of what's going on in the brain, but just a quick, if things are kind of going, why would the student say that? You just have to remind yourself, well, they won't in a couple of years. That's just what they say right now.
So do you struggle with young people in middle school who want to be older and grow up, or do they still have some growing and maturity issues to go through?
I would say we have the gamut. We have some students who are dug into the Pokemon cards, and they are still like second and third graders, and we have other students who have been going out on dates and they're really into that mode. And the biggest thing is, you might see one student do something for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the next month they're going to try something else on. And that's what middle school's all about. I mean, they might try to be the athlete for a while, and then they're going to try on, well, maybe they're an artist now, and that's what middle school should be. They're trying to figure out what they like and what they're good at, and kind of how they want to fit into this world.
Well, now, is your experience that kids grow up overnight, or a new kid walks in the next week to school?
I don't know if it's so much grow up overnight, but there are things that happen, and students go through sometimes big learning events where it changes them. And it's some kids really start to change at about 5th, 6th grade, and other kids it's around 7th and 8th grade, and they just aren't sure who and what they want to be, and are just going to explore and see.
It's really kind of a time where you have to tell people who are involved in education, and teachers and staff and everyone, just to be understanding, and they probably are, and experienced in dealing with young people. But you never know what to expect, do you?
Well, you don't, and you really don't know if you're dealing with a student who maybe even like myself, didn't have an overly successful middle school experience, who came out the other side working in a middle school. You just don't know if you're looking across from the next CEO who doesn't like to pull his pants up today because that's how he's feeling, and next week, he's going to ace all of his tests. And you understand that freedom, and it's kind of exciting because you can tell the students, you have to study, you have to do the things that need to be done, but really, this is a time when it's all about what do you want to be, what do you want to do. And they really have that much freedom, because as we get older, it just gets narrower and narrower how much we can step out and become something different because of the choices we make.
And how do you make sure that students know that there are unlimited opportunities, that they can really have the opportunity to move in any direction now?
We are successful in a program that we've used to sort of help students take a look, and starting in 7th grade. They sort of take a test to sort of see the different things that they enjoy and have strengths in, and they get to look at these different career pathways and see all the different potentials that are out there. And we talk about, we had an actual college day this year, which was nice. We talk about, well, what are you going to do? And some of the kids will tell you, well, I'm going to be an astronaut. And you go, okay, well, let's go. What do you need to do? We need to get your science and your math. And other students are not as sure. But we know that they still need to get their math and their science and their language arts. And so, it's just that time that is really fun to be a part as an adult. But some days it can wear on you.
You say that smiling and laughing. Now, well, so how do you, as an educator and an administrator, really focus on improving student performance at the middle school level?
Over the last few years, it's become more about looking at the data that we receive from the different tests. And we have taken the Explorer tests, we have the MEEP tests, we now have Discovery assessments, and we've become an assessment society. So, you can say, well, that's not where you learn, but in the end, we need to know what can you show me on the day the test is here. And so we look at that data, and then we try to prescriptively say, okay, what do we need to support you so you can do better on the next test? Mm-hmm. And it gets complicated as you get older, but in some ways it's easier. Complicated in that there's so many different things. As you get through like 7th and 8th grade, you're talking the math is really the high school math that we had when we were in school. So now all the algebraic concepts and all the different foundations that are there are just so vast. Whereas if you move down a few grade levels, you may be saying, well, I'm just really working on fractions. And that concept seems easier to sort of manage than all of these different pieces that sort of go into an algebraic concept. Mm-hmm. So, we try to look at all those pieces, give the supports, and, we have a lot of students that are very successful, and we have other students that we keep coming back and we keep helping and we keep that patience. And again, I come up to the high school, and some of those students that we just try with, they just take off at the high school. It's just something that happens.
And so sometimes education and learning really is affected by a young person's maturity. But as you're working with all of these individuals at different levels, you're trying to raise all the boats up a little bit. And that's a challenge for teachers and certainly the administration, isn't it?
Yes, and we, about 4 years ago, were in a different set of circumstances because we had a test score. The mark was a little bit different. The circle was bigger to hit, and a couple years ago we sort of shrunk that circle, and so now some of those kids that were just outside are sort of working harder again to get more focused and become greater potential. And I had a conversation today with a student and a mom, and the student went from, for example, like a 44 to a 37 to a 33 sort of as a score mark that dropped down over the course of 3 years. And I talked to the student, and though the student was still performing, considered in sort of within the allowables, they were losing ground. And we're losing that, making a full year's worth of growth. They lost maybe a month or two every year for the last couple of years. And the parent and the student felt, well, I'm doing everything I need to do. I'm being successful. And I said, well, we need to make sure that while you're here, you do better than a year every year, as much as we can. And so, the parent sort of understood it. The student sort of, got what it was that I was saying. And I said, if you continue at this rate, eventually you're going to slip below the mark. And then you won't be successful. And when it comes times to take that college entrance exam, you're going to be just under the mark you really want to be or could be.
So, from your perspective, do you look at educational discipline in making sure that they're focused and doing what they need to do, or at least investing their learning time appropriately? Or are there other outside factors that sometimes distract them from focusing on what students need to do to achieve really successfully?
Our teaching staff works really hard to focus on the goals or the expectation of the day. And we actually write them on the board, or some of them have them on their websites. And so the kid knows today this is what we're going to learn. And the teachers work to sort of deliver some now through our iPads. We have different readings that we do. We have lab experiences, and they sort of mix it up in different ways to have that experience. But there are students who then need to come back at lunchtime and work with that teacher again. And most of our teachers have 1 or 2 days a week when they take their own lunch to take a student who, for whatever reason, missed it, and then they go over it again. And so that sort of giving whatever's needed and that ongoing looking to see, our teachers have worked really hard to make sure they're using the research-based strategies while the kids are in there. But there are some kids who don't value the experience as much as others, and that can be a challenge. And getting them to understand how they can't get to where they want to go unless they do what needs to be done right here.
Well, what do you do for parents? What advice do you give any parent of a middle schooler to help them do better in school so that they're well positioned to really achieve through high school and beyond?
Well, for the parents that have their first child going through, it's a different conversation than if it's their second or third. And a first child, usually I tell the parents that, okay, you just need to hang on because things are going to seem different the next few years. Your child is going from this, little kid that you knew all growing up that's now going to try out some of these things and experience things, and you're going to look at them and go, where's my kid? What just happened? And at the same time, they're trying on some of these really adult concepts. So, we have different health components, science components, history components. There are some tough matters. I mean, they're going over some historical factors, and so as a 12 or 13-year-old and sitting down and talking about the Civil War and how and why and having that parent conversation and dialogue, when your child is little, you can sort of brush over that concept. But when you have that middle schooler, they're going to come back at you. And so letting them know, be real, be who you are, and share and be transparent about how maybe your middle school experience wasn't perfect. I haven't met many adults that say, I really want to go back and do 7th grade once more, because that's the moment in my life when it was all good and came together. So remembering back, kind of giving that freedom, and then the same way the teachers do, say, well, where is that place where you need to work? Because there's always some place, and finding out what supports you can do. And there's always opportunities to grow and do more. And sometimes it's not looking at math, my grade could be better. Sometimes it's, I haven't really tried an art out. I really need to maybe explore what I can do in vocal music, or what I can do maybe in some of the technology, what I would call arts almost that we have now, with some of the imaging that we can do. And maybe there's something there that you're passionate about that can let you sort of have this great enjoyment that you can grow with the child and sort of learn and experience that doesn't feel that test pressure, that lets you sort of be like, hey, what did you do in art today? Because that's a fun conversation, and keeping that fun connection, because there's days when it's not as much fun for the parents. I sit in the office and see, and the students very clearly usually say, yeah, I did that, and the parents, look at them like, I can't believe that. And we usually then have the student leave and say, okay, and this happens, this is middle school, and if we're in here 3 or 4 more times, then we've got to talk about something else, but mistakes happen.
Do you find that you deal with a lot of discipline issues?
When I arrived at the middle school, we had some structures that needed to sort of be attended to. But really, for the numbers that we have in Charlotte, I deal with the 1%. Yeah. That's who I deal with all day long. I deal with a few students who have made their choice that they just really don't want to be with the system right now. They'd rather take on the system. And
but they like you. They see you a lot.
There are times when you wonder, and they come in smiling. I've got a gentleman right now who likes to start his day with me, and he just comes in and smiles in the morning. We talk a little bit, and kind of heads off to his class, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm too nice. But most of the middle school kids would say, oh no, he's scary. So there's probably a balance there.
Hey, you mentioned the use of technology in the classroom. How do you think it's affected the young people in Charlotte? Because there has been a big investment.
There has. The learning potential with having that portal to going online is amazing. You can go into a classroom and the students can sort of branch out and get question after question after question answered. And they're not used to necessarily working for answers in the same way we did growing up, where you'd say, well, I guess I'm going to have to go down to the library and find a book on that. I'm going to have to read this whole book and see if I can find the passage that will explain what it is I'm asking. Yeah. So they can move through a process of questioning and answering that might have been weeks worth of learning for us. So they get to these answers in these places, and they're able to take on these really vast concepts. That is really interesting and really exciting. At the same time, in middle school, I had a lot of questions that I don't know if I would want to get all the answers to right away. And so there's that balance, and the parents have done a pretty good job at sort of stepping in, and we have really good filters in place. And but it's sort of this great potential experience, and we're getting more and more all the time. We have 200 different applications, or a little over 200 applications on our iPads. And the kids do everything from having large algebraic concepts sort of solved for them in case they're missing a step, to fraction calculators, to SAT quizzes for different words that they can learn if they're an advanced student, or any number of different applications. You can do 3D rendering, you can build your own video game, you can do all of this in here, and every one of those apps is free. We didn't pay for the apps, we just paid for the hardware. And so we're in such a
that must be
different time.
amazing to people when you think about all of the knowledge that's available in all of those applications.
It is. And we have some parents who say, I just don't know if I'm ready. And I tell them, many times they have a cell phone already. The kids have an iPhone. And I said, well, they're already getting their questions answered.
Yeah.
They already have the internet. They're already answering these questions. So you need to start asking them, so what are some of your questions? Because otherwise they're going to get their information from somewhere else.
So what does a young person, from the elementary level have to be prepared for when they go to middle school?
We just changed our dynamics this year, that we took a 6th grade that was moving every hour and moved them into the elementary experience. And moving 5 periods in the day at that middle school age, I think there's something to be said about a 7th and an 8th grader doing the same as the high schoolers and experiencing multiple adults in their day. I think one of the things that we always did growing up was we knew that there were some teachers that just didn't deliver the concepts the same way we would want them to. So we might have the art teacher and the math teacher and the science teacher that we really understood how and why they did what they did, but maybe we went to the language arts class and I didn't get that teacher as much. Mm-hmm. And so that mix is a part of what it means to grow up as an adult in America. There are some times you're going to work with somebody and you're not going to completely understand or maybe think that's the perfect way you wanted to learn it, but there's something to be learned in that different delivery style. There's good information in there, it's a good instructor, and someday you may have a professor and that's your only opportunity to get that degree you need, and you need to learn how to work within their parameters and expectations. And sometimes it's an academic deficit that a kid feels, but sometimes it's just, I like to be able to talk to my friends more in class, and maybe there is more of a reading component so they don't get to talk as much.
Yeah.
And so I think having that openness to maybe there's different ways you can learn and it's okay.
And so when they're done with the middle school experience and they really move into the high school experience, what skills do they have to have when a young person leaves middle school to be successful?
Well, I would say that mathematically, you really need to have a good handle on algebra. I mean, you have to have almost what the traditional high school Algebra 1 finish on math is. And many of our students take the high school algebra class while they're in 8th grade, so they almost have an Algebra 2 concept before they leave. Math is more and more a strong component of what we do. Yeah. They need to have a good awareness of the sciences, but the sciences don't build on each other as much as the math. If you don't have that math foundation, when it comes time to get into the trigonometry and some of these other mathematic concepts, you need to have the foundations. Because you can go off and learn biology if you didn't really get physics, and you'll be okay. But you just can't move on to geometry and trigonometry and the analysis and all those things that some of our high schoolers really enjoy without saying, I have math. The language arts, the writing, you really need to be able to get your voice, and you need to be able to argue a point with having the reasons why. You can't just say, well, I like ice cream and that's the way I am. You need to say, this is the proof that I have, here's why, whatever it is that's good for me, and I am going to be somebody who's going to say, ice cream is something I'm going to tell all of my friends they need to do because, and here's the research. And our kids are getting better at that because they have the tools and they'll be able to build that, but taking your voice and being able to argue something and substantiate your point, it's a very important thing. Underlying both of those, problem solving is becoming more and more of a piece of what we do. We have all of these skills, and a new assessment software that's coming in, Smarter Balanced, is going to take these skills now and push them to a problem solving level that is going to make some of our students work. You're going to have to do the algebra over here, you're going to take the language arts concepts here, and we're going to want you to put some problem solving in here and make sure you share all of this. And then I really want you to write out in essay format what it is that you believe in after reading this data. And I think that, taking and putting it all together, is the new hurdle for many of our students. It's the change that's coming to American education. Because we got really good about 5 years and before at getting all of the little pieces really well. Now we want to take them all and put them together and have you form your opinion, make your point, get out there, debate your point, and do what we do as adults.
Well, Wayne, you've opened the door and allow us to look into the mind of the middle schooler and the administrator for the middle school. We appreciate your patience and handling these questions. And I'm Bob Colton. We'll continue our conversations in Charlotte Public Schools.